Hi. Um, my name's Jennifer, and I just wanted to thank you for taking a moment to watch this video, as opposed to having a phone call. One of the problems I think I've been having with finding an attorney has been that a large majority, I don't speak with, and I have a very difficult time communicating via text alone or just over the phone, especially given the complexity of this situation. Also, there are quite a few things going on. I'm going to do my best to keep everything to what is most pertinent for a short video. And then if you choose to talk with me, I can elaborate and then get into everything else. This is a very complex situation. It's kind of one of those everything all happened all at once sort of things. It is medical malpractice, but there are also some legal malpractice issues, issues with the former employer. All of this works together. Or I'm a medical marijuana patient. I am on my medication. I just had a little bit. I'm probably gonna eat the rest of my sandwich while we talk. But that's important. But I just also want you to see me on this and just understand that the entirety of the situation today made my and what's been going on has made my PTSD so bad this morning that I had a class associated with my job. I had to leave. I couldn't function. Excuse me. So right now, this is I kind of need this to function. I just know that I don't communicate as well while I'm on it, and I do tend to get distracted, so I apologize. I'm going to use it again too, but anyway, there's medical malpractice, legal malpractice, there were issues of former employer. The legal malpractice, and there's something going on with an estate, which you'll understand when I have the opportunity to explain everything. The legal malpractice is regarding a bankruptcy that he decided to destroy my life for some reason because of an estate that I'm attached to, or was attached to at one point. I think I'm still attached to it as a beneficiary. I have evidence of this. The attorney, he lied to me about the date that he filed the documents. Because he lied to me, he also filed almost a month later than he was going to originally. Because that happened and because he lied to me, I had to cancel a trip to the UK where I was going to visit a friend and talk to her about the things that were going on in my life at the time, including a whistleblower case against my former employers. I also was going to meet her husband. Her husband has since passed away. A part of me, the fact that I did not get to meet her husband before he died. So this attorney basically, the court told me to reach out to him to reschedule. That's what it says on the paperwork, and he just told me not to show up. It was when he said that I immediately lost trust in him. I canceled my trip. It's a good thing he wasn't planning on showing up to the hearing. I got there, he was an hour late. But anyway, he chose not to, he intentionally filed under what the trustee wanted for a payment to see if the trustee would counteroffer. The trustee declined it, said that it was under the bankruptcy code minimum. And as opposed to asking me if I could redo my budget, which I would have, or get a second job, which I was in the process of obtaining, he simply chose not to file paperwork. And because of that, the case got dismissed, my credit became destroyed, and when I had to flee a living situation where my life was threatened, when I tried to bring up an issue with the person I was living with, which I will elaborate more on, I tried to address, so basically I was living with my mother and her husband after a divorce. My parents, he's not my father, he's her husband, but my mom at least, doesn't necessarily believe in divorce attorneys for women. I'm guessing because both times I got divorced, I kind of had to take the hit. And I'm going to get to the medical stuff in a few minutes. But my ex-husband basically left me to die on the couch. I had very serious medical issues. I fled him, and when I went to her and asked her for help, but the PTSD was so bad, I didn't have a chance to think straight. So what she ended up doing was she decided to buy a house, and then have me move in with her. The reason she had been renting and was considering moving out of state, but she and her husband decided to buy. And the reason they decided to buy was that if I had my real estate license at the time, I don't anymore. If I had referred an agent to them, I would get a portion of the commission, and that would help me after my divorce, and that would be her way of helping me. But strange enough, I never got paid my commission, and my mom never asked. Anyway, so I was living with her. I was trying to get back on my feet. The first year, my medical issues were so bad. I could barely function, and I ended up losing my car because I wasn't making enough money. I wasn't able to do much other than drive for Lyft, and I lost the car because I wasn't making enough. But then I was able to find a job. Now, I am on the medical cannabis program. Now, initially it didn't start because of weight loss, but it helped. It is very, very complex, and I don't want to get too detracted from at least the more recent stuff, because I know that there are statutes of limitations on things, but you need to I also know that there are rare circumstances where those statutes can be fought. This is one of those rare circumstances because it's the attorney who decided not to file all the paperwork. He's basically the only reason, aside from, at that point in time, there are other reasons prior to that point in time, like my not having legal representation for the estate, and so my thinking that I was going to be receiving a sum of $120,000 and that I was safe to flee my husband without any form of support, and I would be able to support myself. That was a lie that I was going to receive that. So I again, had I known what was going on with the estate, very different. But after that point, when I fled, the only option I really had at that point anymore was bankruptcy. And because of this attorney, it's basically the only reason I ended up lured into a human trafficking situation. Now, I will admit that compared to other situations, it's not nearly as bad. It has morphed to an eviction situation. Compared to other, a lot of what I experienced while living in here was almost like this overwhelming guilt from him that I didn't deserve the help from the grants and COVID funds and stuff for rent, because they were for people who really needed help and I didn't need help. The thing was, I wasn't able to leave my house because of what he was doing and because my mom was holding me hostage in the house with the police. So I wasn't able to make any money. I wasn't able to leave. It has since morphed into an eviction. But it did start as trafficking. It was one that I will elaborate more on that later, but realistically, it may have been in part because he doesn't believe that I'm sick, and that I do actually have a legitimate medical malpractice lawsuit. I am going all over the place right now, so I am just going to, because I don't want this to be over 15 minutes, and it's already getting really long, but at least you kind of... So very realistically, I've had a succession of medical events and realizations. Basically in 2017, my mom revealed I have very early memories, but it was something that was forgotten because my dad pretended that it didn't happen. But it did pertain to what I started going through in 2016. My mom revealed to me that I had spent the first 2.5 years of my life in a pediatric neurology clinic. They had lost a spinal tap and never figured out what was wrong with me, but I spent 3 years on phenobarbital. Like, there's a lot of childhood medical neglect, not necessarily intentionally, but quite possibly due to my mom's narcissistic personality disorder. But that's I'm not going to get into that. I'm so sorry, I don't have an accent. Put my dog's hair here. You can have that mayonnaise. There you go. Okay, I'm so sorry. I have been isolated for a long period of time right now, so I apologize. I'm on such tight budget. I have such issues with food that, like, I'm not buying paper towels anymore. I do have toilet paper, but I'm like trying to keep things to a minimum, so I'm not spending that, and I can focus on like getting out of this. As I basically had to rent a car to drive for Lyft and Uber, and I'm not gonna to get to a point where I lost my cosmetology license because I wasn't able to leave the house because my mom was using the cops to hold me hostage in the house. My landlord was doing stuff to basically keep me hostage in the house. So I lost my cosmetology license, and it took me, several years to get back to the point where I could go back to work, and I've just started working again. And so anyway, I'm getting distracted. In 2019, there was a series of events that occurred. In 2018, I actually developed a pectus excavatum. That's not something that should have happened at 32 years of age. I may be one of the only people in the world that that's happened to. There are some underlying factors, like I had just, I had been living with my mom. My depression acted up because I shouldn't have been living with my mom. I should have been living on my own. I can't be an adult with my mother. Her house, her rules. So I had to be very, respectful of that. Anyway, I had I'll get it. I'm sorry, I can't. There's so much. So that happened. My primary care doctor, former primary care doctor, he just didn't seem fazed by the fact that I developed pectus excavatum. In 2016, I lost 50 pounds in 4 months, and from that point onward, I was losing about 10 to 20 pounds a year, but cumulatively over the course of a year, I was probably losing 50 to 60 pounds, gaining weight and then losing it, and then gaining weight and then losing it. Right now, I'm retaining weight, but what I was going to say is I developed pectus excavatum while it was during a period of a bit of depression, and I had forgotten to take my Synthroid, so my thyroid hormones were all over the place. My TSH levels were very, very, very elevated. I had also just been, I had been involved with someone for the first time. My body actually may have been producing certain hormones that it hadn't previously because of lack of certain kinds of intimacy in my life previously. At that particular point in time, I actually had that in my life, so I may have been, there were hormonal changes going on in my body, and I developed the pectus. And I do have proof that it did not exist prior to March 2018. And that my former primary care doctor, when I showed him the proof, actually screamed at me that the radiologist didn't know what he was talking about, and he started screaming, nobody would operate on me. And it was just I didn't want an operation. I wanted to know why it happened, because I can feel my ribs warping sometimes. But he screamed at me after I had my stroke. So in 2019, and you need to understand, there are other things that were going on. Like I said, I had a whistleblower case. My former employers, I worked for a workers' compensation court reporting firm. And they were aware of what was going on in my life at that point in time, as far as all the medical stuff. And I'm not even kidding. I had kind of called them out on some things like violating ad laws and the use of a court reporter who herself may be violating the law. And they just kind of like dismissed it. So there maybe have been some retaliation and intentionally trying to prevent me from which I can explain. But this is why it's important to understand that this is very complex and anyway. So in 2019, I ended up being in excruciating pain while I was working. I went to the emergency room, like abdominal pain. I went to the emergency room. They did a CAT scan. The doctor was more concerned about the fibroid that I have. He didn't tell me that I have a hernia. That was where I felt the pain, was where the hernia is. Anyway, he was so concerned about my fibroid that he wanted to make sure I got into the OBGYN immediately. I was able to see the OBGYN the next week, and she actually kind of seemed pissed that I was there. She didn't want to go over my medical history. She didn't really seem to care. I do have a family history of like uterine cancer. Myself, I've had thyroid cancer, papillary, stage 2. It was mixed classic and tall cell. I've had a total thyroidectomy, 2 parathyroids, and over 113 lymph nodes removed. And something you need to understand about that was I had my first surgery when I was 24, and my mother hijacked my medical care illegally. The doctor probably likely remembers it because that's not something you forget. But my mom ended up in the appointment when the doctor called me back in to, for the biopsy, started screaming at my doctor that I could only see her doctor. So legitimately, the 3 surgical clips that are in my neck that may have contributed to my disability in 2015 may be entirely her fault. The doctor who did my surgery, it was supposed to only take 2 hours. It took 5 because, to the best of my recollection, they couldn't stop the bleeding and they couldn't wake me up from the anesthesia. He also didn't think I would be able to speak after my surgery. I had issues with the hospital. At that point in time, I'm in New Jersey, and one of the reasons I'm reaching out to you, it has to do with my former employers. I am terrified. Anyway, the hospital at that point in time, I actually have a friend who, he had been a phlebotomist. He has unfortunately since passed away, but he did disclose to me that at that particular point in time that I was in the hospital there, Hunterdon Medical Center was having some issues with their lab, misdiagnosing cancer. When I went from Hunterdon Medical Center to Penn, this was in 2010 or 2011, I actually had to go in and fight with the lab technicians to get my slides released because they only wanted to release a single slide to Penn, and the slide showed, it was a single slide, and Penn wanted all of the slides because I had a 60-40 classic tall cell split that was BRAF positive, which was, rarer at that time. And what's important to understand is that I did not know this at that point in time, and you would think that given she had taken over my medical care without my consent and wouldn't let me tell her no, she would have disclosed that she had childhood cancer. She had, at the age of 14, the opposite of leukemia. That's what she was told. That is a very rare mast blood cell cancer. That was not mentioned at all to my doctors. Anyway, so I'm all over the place right now, and I'm also a very intuitive person, and I'm also high, but my intuition is telling me that I really don't need to elaborate further on that. I'm just going to get to what happened with the stroke, and then, yeah. In 2019, so I went, the doctor she didn't really seem to care about the fibroid. She seemed more concerned that I was having unprotected sex. I had a single partner. We stopped seeing each other 6 weeks later, but she wanted to put me on birth control. Like, she didn't ask if we were planning on having kids or anything like that. It's almost like she didn't recognize I was 34. Anyway, um, she really wanted me on birth control and said that it would help with the pain. So I went on the birth control. I had asked her if it would interact with my Synthroid because I've been off birth control since 2009, and she didn't think so. It was Junelfi. I was on it for 2 weeks. I had to come off of it because of what happened. The personality changes, the hormonal swings, the issues, cognitive issues. It was bad. So I came off of it after 2 weeks. And then about a week or 2 weeks after that, I had the stroke, likely stroke. Now, it's important to understand that about 3 days before the stroke, I had very athletic sex, where I was in a position with my partner, where I was in a position where there was, kind of, my hernia, it's an umbilical hernia, would cause problems, and I ended up throwing up, and then 3 days later I had the stroke. And I'm saying that I had the stroke, basically I ended up getting this massive headache. I was watching TV and on my phone at the same time, and I got this massive headache that was blurry, and I remember going to sleep, starting to fall asleep and feeling what felt like an ice pick stab the back of my head. And then for 2 days, I couldn't barely open my eyes. I could take the dogs outside. That's all I could do. I slept. The third day I woke up and the right side of my face was paralyzed. Now I have trigeminal neuralgia, bilateral atypical trigeminal neuralgia. I was diagnosed with it in 2010, January 2011, I'm sorry. The trigeminal neuralgia, bilateral atypical, I was able to get it under control with 3 years of electroacupuncture and massage. I, being all sorts of messed up from the cognitive effects of what had happened, I was looking up things for facial paralysis. I accidentally, first off, when the cops arrived, the woman just looked at me, she's like, "Oh, it's you." And then just basically they were taking the stretcher off the ambulance, and she's like, "Put it back," and she forced me to walk up. She didn't believe I had a stroke. Anyway, I told them I had trigeminal neuralgia, and they all looked at me like what? And I explained, I said it has another name, and instead of saying tic deliquois, I said Bell's palsy. It was an accident. It was a total accident. And the moment I said that, they wouldn't allow me to correct it. And I spent legitimately the entire rest of the time saying, "No, it's trigeminal neuralgia. No, it's trigeminal neuralgia. No, it's trigeminal neuralgia. No, it's trigeminal neuralgia." All of the paramedics, all of these guys, all they were doing was just fawning over my tattoos. No one would let me correct myself. I get to the hospital. "Oh, you've had this before, I see." "No, I haven't. This is the first time. I have trigeminal neuralgia. I've never had this happen before." "Oh, yeah, you've had this before." "No, I haven't. No, I haven't. I've had trigeminal neuralgia. I had a stroke." And they're just no, not even listening to me. It got to the point where I started crying. And the nurse came in, and my concern, I expressed to her my concern that they were going to misdiagnose me. Now, I don't have it in my chart, because if there's an emergency where I need I'm having an allergic reaction, I need Benadryl, I will take Benadryl. But it has in the past caused me to hallucinate, at least when I was a child. I haven't taken it since. I try not to take it since unless it's an emergency. Anyway, so she comes in. She had told me that they were going to give me something for the pain, and then a steroid and Valtrex. She comes in and she just hands me these pills, and she's like, "This is what I told you, here you go." And I was just like, "Oh, okay." So I took these pills, and when I was discharged, she gave me Benadryl. When I told her I was concerned that they were going to misdiagnose me because I was having problems communicating because I had had a stroke and I had trigeminal neuralgia, I had not ever had Bell's palsy before, she gave me Benadryl sneakily, and then had the doctor come in and scream at me. Tell me, you know why you're here, you've had this before. And I'm just like, what in the fuck? Never before have I ever had Bell's palsy, not even once. They did do a CAT scan, but we all know CAT scans are not very efficient. You need to have an MRI. which, the insurance doesn't do. But no, I have trigeminal, I still have, like, this is my face now. For a while, I would still have nerve issues. Like, if I popped a zit, I would just start sneering. No control over it. I, a few months later, ended up having a 6-month headache that felt like a suction cup at the top of my head. And I ended up having an MRI with and without contrast that showed bilateral hyperintense punctate foci. I have no idea what an MRI would have shown had I had it at the point when I went to the hospital with the partially paralyzed face. Anyway, they also may have given me a heart attack. This is important to understand because I had spent a week in the cardiac care unit at another hospital in the beginning of 2017. I had developed this movement disorder that was actually quite similar to what I was diagnosed with in childhood. And when the movement disorder would happen, in childhood I was diagnosed with myoclonic seizures because they couldn't figure out what was happening, but I didn't have any seizures. Everything stopped. But it seems to be triggered by the cold, and when it would happen, my heart rate would go up to about 160, 170 beats per minute. So this hospital, they gave me a whole bunch of steroids, and then they gave me the EKG. And for the very first time in my life, the EKG came back as possible atrial infarct, that it was an abnormal EKG, or EEG. I may be saying the wrong thing, and I apologize if I am. I'm fairly certain they gave me a heart attack or something similar, or something was going on because of the fact that they didn't tell me the results. Normally they'll tell you the results. They did the EKG, and then they discharged me. They did not tell me the results. They uploaded them to the patient portal 3 days later. It was Monday. It was Thursday they uploaded them to the patient portal. Sorry, I have to stretch my legs. So I found out 3 days later they may have given me a heart attack. When I went to my primary care physician, the first thing he immediately screamed at me was not to worry about my heart. And it was just like, wait a second, what? I spent a week in cardiac, and I have this movement disorder that seems to be triggered by the cold. And he just started screaming at me. And then he started screaming at me that no one would operate on me. And I'm just like, I don't want an operation. I want to know why this is happening. There's more. I have a lot of evidence of things. A lot of documentation. Just before this gets to be a half hour, I'm going to stop it and just let you know that I was on disability in 2016. Again, it should have been 2015. It should have been workers' comp. Basically, and I'm not going to get too into details, but I had peripheral neuropathy and partial paralysis of my left arm that then spread to the right arm, the torso, and the legs. It lasted about a year, but it was laying completely flat on my back for months at a time. The spinal decompression, that's what healed it. I have 3 surgical clips in my neck and would spend 10 hours a day on the phone like this at work. The doctors thought it was cervical, but they couldn't figure it out, and at no point was my job discussed. However, I lost my job because of this doctor's office practices. He requires patients in every 2 weeks for a visit, even though it would just be like a 30-second visit. Now, for me specifically, he was an hour away from my house. Sitting in my car for an hour while I had an extraordinarily painful and often paralyzing condition that was aggravated by sitting upright and was only alleviated by laying flat, spending nearly 3 hours in a car upright every 2 weeks made my condition really difficult to manage. But also, it was the every 2 weeks of coming in with a work note. That was why I got fired. There's an unemployment hearing that talks about that. It was because they didn't know when I was coming back and they got fed up. So that doctor is also the only reason I lost my job, essentially. Anyway, there are a lot of other things that are going on. Obviously, this is already a half hour long, so I'm going to stop. It would be really wonderful if someone could speak with me If not, I understand. I know it's a lot, and there's a lot more I haven't discussed, but thank you for your time, and I appreciate you greatly, and I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.